Hi everyone, I'm just going to let the presentation go live. So as soon as you can hear this, we'll get underway. So it'll just be 1 or 2 minutes while we wait until some people, until everyone's online, and then we can check that it's working, and then we will get going. Just let me know if you can see this now. Feel free to post in the chat. Great. Okay. So it looks like it's working. I'll give a quick introduction, and then if you've got any questions, fire them through as we go. This is 10 steps to leading the change. And it's all about having a framework, asking the questions that you may have always been wondering, and actually just having an idea of where do I start? You might know that you really want to change something. You might just know that you have skills that can really do some good in the world, and you want to know where to apply them. Well, that is what the point of today's session is. Okay, great. So it looks like it's working well. We're getting it underway. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to post up some slides. And again, if any of this doesn't come through, you know how to let me know while this is going on. So let's keep this a discussion, let's keep it a dialogue. And I'm also going to save some time at the end for questions. So don't hesitate. If you've got any questions, put them in the chat. Nothing's a silly question. So we're just going to kick off now with 10 steps to leading the change. Cool. So just to check one last thing, I am going to be sharing some slides while we are doing this. Can everybody see the slides that are presented at the moment? And hopefully this is all the admin we've got to do, and then we'll really get underway. But I know that in the past, some of these webinars have had a little bit of trouble with slides. So just let me know. Cool. So unless anyone lets me know, we're getting underway. This is 10 steps to leading the change. You might ask, what are those 10 steps? Here they are. Cool. Looks like people can see them. The 10 steps. Here they go. Defining your purpose. So that's what I was talking about before. What is it that you want to do? Starting your own project, building a team, setting up an email and a drive. So there's some of the really practical things. Setting up a website that might be a bit intimidating, but I want to show that they can be really simple. Okay, cool. Funding, advertising and outreach, project sustainability. That's how to make sure your project keeps going and possibly more generations than just you starting it. Personal sustainability, that's how you don't burn out and how you can make sure that you are there, because you're the most important person. Keeping this project running is all dependent on the fact that you can keep yourself going and keep up your commitment. And finally, breaking the rules. So after I've given you this framework, it's really a matter of, use the parts that work for you, but really tailor it to your situation. Cool. So in my experience, there are 2 types of people. There are those who know exactly what they want to do. They have the passion, they have the skills, and they've got the clearly defined purpose. Perhaps they've been personally affected by something, or perhaps they just really see some injustice and they want to change it. These types of people are great, and they can get straight into it. I personally, however, am the second type of person. It's taken me a long time to realize where I want to make change. I know that I have some skills that are really applicable to making change, and I've tried them in a few different organizations and avenues. But it's taken me a long time to decide where I should make some change. And so I think that's something that I don't think I'm alone in. And so I think it's worth just spending a little bit of time thinking about what to do in that kind of situation. Because there are hundreds of organizations out there that you could be a part of, and even more that you could start yourself. So where do we start with that? Well, three things that I think define an organization are the vision, the mission, and the value statement, right? And so what does this mean? So for example, the vision. The vision is, what does your organization, what is the change that you want to see? So ideally, I think an organization should exist if they have a social benefit with the aim of putting itself out of business. This means that, there will come a day when there is no need for your organization. And I think that is a sort of selfless drive that should be behind an organization for good, right? So let's think about some really good vision statements that I've seen in the past. Very clear and concise. Got a couple here. A world without Alzheimer's by the Alzheimer's Association. Very simple. You know exactly within 4 words what they're aiming to achieve. And Oxfam there as well, a just world without poverty. 5 words, you can tell exactly at what point, the organization can tick a box and say, we have achieved what we're going to achieve. Now, it doesn't mean that they're easy, but it means that there is a very clearly defined goal in mind. And I think that's key. The next thing is the mission. So how is it that you're going to achieve this change? And again, we've got some really nice examples here. For example, Spread Ideas, TED, you might have heard that one. Or Tesla, slightly longer, but to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. So, they're kind of giving a pathway through which they will achieve their vision. Now, the third part of this trifecta is the values. And I think this is one of the most important parts of your organization, because it really defines your approach and really makes a difference, how you go about doing things. Cool. So the values, and I've just got a couple here that I think have really resonated with me, and feel free to share any that, have resonated with you or any ideas that you have. First one that I've heard, and I don't actually know how to attribute this to, but is the phrase willing to sweep floors. And I think that putting yourself not at the forefront of the organization and actually thinking, we're here to get this done, is, I think, a really noble cause. And the fact that you're willing to do anything, you're not necessarily there to be a spokesperson and take all the limelight. And that was something that I thought, wow, that's really cool. And that kind of organization is one that I could identify with. But again, none of this is, there are no correct answers in any of these. Another one with an organization that I personally worked with, Engineers Without Borders, they address self-identified needs in communities. So the way at which they go to achieve their vision is they ask the communities that they're working with, what is it that you would like us to help with? And again, this is a completely different approach to going to an overseas territory and just providing a service, when really it's about that stakeholder engagement. And again, I think that is really important. So I'm just going to run you through a short framework now of how I have chosen the organizations that I've been working with. And because one thing that it really means to me is there are so many organizations that are already out there. If you have a passion, if you have a drive, 100% go ahead and make that change. But I urge you to take a second to consider, should you make that change yourself and completely start something new? Or are there people that you can work with, people who have already put some of that groundwork in, that you can really make the biggest impact? So I think that it's important to remember what the goal is and to take ego out of the situation. So there are a few things that you can change before I get into this framework. A few ways that you can share sort of resources. There are already organizations out there. Seek them out, ask around. And even if that organization isn't doing exactly the same thing that you're trying to do, they will have encountered some of the same problems. Some of the things I'm going to go through today are pretty core and common across organizations and groups trying to make change. Just setting up a team, setting up a website. And a lot of people have gone through these problems before. Don't confine yourself just to working through and hitting the same walls that everyone else has hit. learn from others, right? So share their models, share their lessons. One place that I just want to point out as a really good place to start is actually the Global Changemakers website. So they've got some fantastic toolkits on the website, and the link is on the screen. And I think this is one of the great ways that you can take the lessons and take the learnings that people have already made and use those. Okay, so I'd 100% recommend checking these out. This is a way that I found where I wanted to contribute. So I personally wasn't sure. I knew that I had skills, but I didn't know which organization out there would be the best one for me to contribute to. So firstly, I thought, what is it that I'm passionate about? What are my strengths? I looked through the list of charitable organizations within Australia, and there were hundreds. So I pulled out a few that really stood out to me. I then decided, what is it that's important to me and that I want to spend my time doing and makes it convenient and allows me to develop at the same time. And then I rated the different opportunities against the criteria and then went from there. So I'll run you through a quick example, and then we'll get into the practical side of things as to how you set these up. So this is the example of how I chose which organizations that I wanted to work with. And you can do whatever works for you, but this is just a framework that you might want to keep in mind. There were 4 areas that I was interested in: education, poverty, health, and community. Now, I've taken the names out of the organizations, but I went through and I chose some that really stood out in each of those fields. I then said, what is it that is important to me? And in committing my time, I want to do something that I'm passionate about, something where there's actually a need in the organization and a likelihood that I will be able to contribute, something that has an impact of an appropriate size, the connection to the opportunity was also an important criteria. Do I know people already in the organization who I can talk to and get a good understanding of where I can best fit? Again, appropriate size, and also location and timing, because it's important to remember that when people are looking to commit their time to a new organization or to your own, they have their own restrictions. Personally, time was a big one for me. So that was another of my criteria. What I did here, and again, this is just some mock numbers. I looked at these things and said, on a score from 0 to 10, how much do they align with each of these different criteria? And then I ranked them after I put the scores, added up the scores, and I realized that there were some organizations that really stood out. And I went through a process of contacting those organizations to say, hey, I'm really passionate, and to see if the opportunity was there. So this is a framework that's worked for me. And if it works for you, great. Feel free to ask me if you've got any questions about this, and we can go through it in more detail later if it's something that's of interest. But moving on. Now we're really getting onto the facts. So maybe you found an organization, or maybe you've decided to start your own. What are the things that you just need to do to kick that off and really get set up? So the first one is building a team. We don't ever tackle these problems on our own. And I think it's important to realize that you have amazing skills. Everyone has skills that can really make a difference. But we also have areas where we're not as skilled. And what's really important is having other people to help us build the overall skill level so that there's someone to achieve everything in the team. Now, thinking about this, I found 6 core functions that I believe are important to any team. Now, these don't necessarily have to be individual, each performed by an individual person, but I think that each team has to have somebody doing each of these things to succeed. And now there are plenty more, but these ones are the ones that I've seen time and time again that really need to be there. They're kind of the pillars of the organization. And each of these is important as well. None is more important than any of the others. The first, in my opinion, was the organizer. Just having somebody who makes sure, that your next meeting's in the calendar, that everything is ticking along. That's important. Then there's the doer, the person that actually, once you say you're going to do things in meetings, or say you're going to approach organizations, then those have to be done. That's quite simple. And it could be, that a lot of people in your team do this and, get really on the front line. Going around, there's the external communicator. So in trying to solve a problem, it's very unlikely that you will be doing it sitting on the inside of a room. Very often, you'll have to be working with an organization, with a community, and with different stakeholders. You need to make sure that you have somebody who can take care of those stakeholders and make sure, like I said before, you're actually addressing the needs of the community, of the problem, and also, with potential volunteers and things like that. So it's a key role. Then there's people and culture. So coming on volunteers, you need someone to make sure that the team can be managed, that you can recruit new people when you need it. And when people are, having a tough time, maybe they don't have the commitment to volunteer at a particular moment in their, because things are going on, you need to make sure that there's, the ability to work with your team. And we'll come to sustainability later. But that's just an important thing to bear in mind. IT, I think this isn't just IT, but it's processes. To have an organization, you need to have make sure that everything can run smoothly. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it means that if you want people to communicate with you, you've got to have someone checking your emails or your WhatsApp or your Instagram, however you do it. And it also means that, if you are going to have a meeting, you've got somewhere to store the minutes of that meeting. So the great ideas and brainstorming that you do isn't lost. So next, we've got finances. And this is where a lot of organizations trip up. The finances are, I guess, they're not what people always want to spend their time on, because you're very often passionate about something, and the finances are the way that it's facilitated, the way that you support your website or the tools or the resources that you've got to use. So it has to happen, and we'll address funding as we go through. There are a couple more points I just want to bring up on the team, and that is, you've got to choose whether or not you want to build a team with, your friends and people or assess people's skills, and sort of see where they can contribute to the team. Because it's often that you've just got to be careful that you develop the relationships in a way that will allow you to work together. Building a team, especially of volunteers, often involves quite difficult commitment, because people have to commit their time. And unless people are willing to commit, you can spend a lot of your time chasing up people and not actually doing the output side of the organization. So really consider who you're recruiting, and be inclusive, but make sure that everyone who's coming into your team understands the way in which you're going to operate, and how and the commitment that you require from them. And the third point on that is just diversity. On the slide are 6 different skill sets that you need, but there are so many more. There's innovation, there's endless amounts. Make sure you appreciate the different skills that people can bring to your team, and let people come in and they'll have ideas that you didn't. Cool. So again, take note of any questions you've got now. Feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll address them as we get towards the end. This is where it starts getting a little bit more technical. We're going to get on to setting up an email and a drive, and then we're going to go on to setting up a website. These are some of the things that people often shy away from. But if you've had experience with these, you'll know that they're actually not that difficult. And again, if you've had experience with these, then that's great. But I just want to make sure that this presentation is available to people who don't necessarily have the experience. And that's why feel free to ask any questions, even if it's something that you think, a lot of people will already know the answer to. I'm happy to address those as we get to the end. This is pretty simple. Setting up an email and a drive. Now, there are lots of options out there, but the one that I've personally had experience with and that I would recommend taking a look at is Gmail and Google Drive, both offered by Google. I've put a link on the slide, and these are, you can either sort of get just an individual account on these, or they have what's known as like a Google Apps Suite. And that's just where they make the functions that are available for businesses available. Now, for registered charities and non-profits, they make these available for free. So I really do recommend looking at that link that I've got there. We'll get into more detail with the website slide. But really what's involved with these is just going, to Google, going on, creating a new account, and they're really simple to set up. So the Google Gmail platform, you just have to think of a name of your organization, and it's really easy to set up. So you think of a name and you connect it. And I'm sure, if you're watching this, you will have had experience with email, but I just think that it's worth noting that it's good to have a separate one for these that allows you to communicate on behalf of your organization and not just as an individual. So for example, if I was starting an organization called 10 Steps to Leading the Change, I could get 10 Steps to Leading the Change at gmail.com. Or, and we'll get to this later, I could look at getting my own domain, which could be Charlie at 10stepstoleadingthechange.com. And setting up a Google account comes with a Google Drive. This is file storage, and it's a great place to keep track of all the ideas that you have as you go through setting up an organization. So that's brainstorms, keeping meeting minutes, and making sure that you record the processes that you go through. So even if it's recruitment and you write role descriptions, store them and make sure it's well organized. Make sure you commit the time to setting up a drive so that when somebody goes to do the same thing, in a year's time perhaps, and you recruit a new person, the organization is there and you don't spend time doing the same things over and over again that you've already done. This is a little bit more technical, this one, setting up a website, and possibly fewer people have experience with this. I have recommended a couple here, and there are plenty more of free website platforms that you can use to set up a website. I'm going to take you through one. It's called Wix, and just show you how simply you can set up a website in just a few minutes. And again, there are plenty of options out there. This is just one of them. So this is Wix. There's a simple button. It says Start Now. Create your own beautiful website. So if you click Start Now, it takes you through to signing up. And again, you can just type in your details here. One thing that I recommend is making sure that you keep all of the things to do with your organization to themselves. So use your organization email that you've set up. Continue with the Google account if you've used that platform. And this just means that maybe in a few years' time, your organization is set up and you want to hand that organization on to someone else. It makes this process really easy. Or maybe you hire someone to deal with your IT. It means you can hand this over without having to give them access to your personal email account. So use templates. This is just a couple of things that Wix prompts you with as you go through. It says, what type of site do you want to create? So I typed in charity there, but you could type in anything, right? It could be that you want to start a company. It could be that you want to start a social enterprise. Type it in, see what other people have used, and feel free to use templates to make it easier. If there's one message that I will reiterate time and time again, It's that we should really be sharing the lessons as we go through. I guarantee you that all of these issues that you will encounter while setting up an organization or creating change, people will have encountered before. So feel free to ask. You can ask anyone. You can ask like global changemakers. You can ask me. Feel free to put things in the comments of the video, or I'll make my email address or a way in which you can contact me after this. But make sure you reach out and use the resources that are there. Within this website platform, it's great. They've already got the resources within there. So you choose what type of site you want to create and you pick a style. Simple as that. What happens after that? It sets up a website for you. Seriously, it's that simple. So this is one that I created earlier. It says 10 steps to leading the change and already has the tabs along the top: home, about, our causes, and contact and that sort of thing. Now, if I wanted to edit this, change that picture, edit and replace, I just click on that. And I can type freeform into this. I don't have to understand anything about coding. There's no HTML or anything like that. It's literally just typing, almost like editing a Word document. The one point where this gets a little bit more technical is when you publish the website. So there'll be a button that says publish. And what publishing means is making the website available for the general public to see. So previously, when you're editing it, only you can see that. But when you publish it, it's there. Anyone can type in the address and they can visit your website. And you can link to it from Instagram or Facebook or send it out in emails. So there are two options when doing this, and I alluded to it before. There's either using a free domain, a bit like just having an email address at gmail.com. And so, for example, with Wix that I just went through, they will provide you one .wixsite.com. And you can customize that a little bit, but it's always going to have Wixsite in there. The alternative, and this does cost money, is buying a domain name. So if you want to start something, perhaps it's www.10stepstoleadingchange.com. I would have to purchase that name, 10stepstoleadingchange.com, and I could link it to my website so that when anyone visited that address, they could find the website that I've just created. The good thing about owning a domain is that you can also link this to your email. So I could create an email address, which was Charlie at 10 steps to leadingchange.com. And that's how people could contact me. And again, these sites are made so that you can do it with no experience, because there's always guides in there. And if you ever get stuck, remember, just Google it, ask someone, email me. That's always available. Never be afraid to ask. Particularly if you're passionate about something and people can see that you're passionate, there will be endless people willing to help. So that's setting up a website, and it's surprisingly painless. After this, another one that people often struggle with is funding. So a lot of people think that funding, is having a bake sale, asking for donations, constantly going out and, doing raffles or, holding a bucket and asking people to donate. That is really valuable. And I think that it's commendable, all of the organizations that commit time to doing this and achieve great things with donations. The one thing I have to say about donations, though, is that it's very time intensive. There's not necessarily an ongoing element to it without committing more time and, doing another fundraising activity. So once as a small organization, this can be very intensive for your volunteers, because every time you want to do something new or even continue existing programs, you're constantly having fundraising over and over again. So think about this, and it could be the right way for your organization. particularly if there are people who are willing to donate. But there are other ways out there. So I've just picked a few here that I think are worth considering. One is grants. Now, grants are a bit like donations, except they typically come from organizations as opposed to individuals. So grants will have an application process. So you'll have to often write an email or send a letter saying what your organization is and how you're aiming to achieve change. So it's essentially convincing someone, a bit like a business pitch, of what you're trying to do and getting them to invest their money in your organization. And there are plenty of these out there. I definitely consider looking into these. And the great thing with doing funding applications through something like a grant is that once you have defined your organization, once you've really nailed your mission, your vision, and your values, you will be able to write that once and use that same information again and again in your applications. Now, don't be afraid of you not getting a grant. So you can put it out an application, and it's quite possible that someone will say, sorry, we're not going to allocate our money to this project at this time. But that's okay. It costs you nothing but time and determination. So you get unlimited attempts at applying for grants, and because there are so many out there. So if you don't get one, that's okay. Brush it off and move on. But I really recommend that you develop your pitch, which means make sure everyone who is within your organization knows what you were trying to achieve. Make sure that everyone, when they speak to someone about your organization, has the same message. And when you really define your pitch and how you're going to go about making change and can convey that passionately, that will resonate with people. And that is a key. And a lot of these things, grants and sponsorship and even fundraising, because you have to talk to people to get them to support your project. So knowing that you're fully invested in it will help them invest in it too. The fourth one that I think is important. Oh, so I see that it's quite blurry. I wonder what I can do to change that. I have a feeling that, sorry, I'm just looking at the comments that are coming through. I have a feeling that might just be due to the fact that it's live streaming. So if that comes up, I'll just leave it a little bit of time, and hopefully it will just be the internet and it will connect through. It's just that it's live streaming this as opposed to a static image. But if it's still a problem in a couple of minutes, I'll address that. So sorry, back to the presentation. And I'll make sure that I talk through everything on the slide. So if you can't see them that clearly, I'll still tell you what my message is. So the last thing with funding is accelerator programs. So there were 4 points on this slide. The accelerator programs are something a little bit different. So often it comes with funding, but there are programs out there that will support you through your development as an organization. So an accelerator program, in New Zealand, where I'm from, there are accelerator programs that are run by government departments, for example, but there are lots of them out there. And the point of an accelerator program is to take your idea and sort of guide you through the setup process. And often these are associated with money. You can support your organization not only with the skills, but financially. So I recommend looking into these. And again, it's all about how well you present your mission to whoever is hosting the accelerator program. It's a similar process of applying for a grant. Cool. So someone's just put a great comment in about the video quality. So feel free to read that and let me know if that solves the issue. Thanks. So we'll keep going through. We've just got a few more points to get to here. And once we've covered off these 4 last points, I'll happily answer any questions that you have. So feel free to start thinking of them as we go, and you can even put them in the chat now, and I'll get to them at the end. So there are 4 more things that I'd like to take you through with my framework. The next one is advertising or outreach. So as I said before, inevitably you're not just operating by yourself. You have to talk to people, whether it's the community that you're working with and trying to create change, whether it's the people who you would like to donate or fund your venture, or whether or not it's just the people who support you and maybe come to your events or sign up for your programs. You need to communicate with them. And there are lots of different ways of doing this. But I think the first question you should ask yourself is, who are you trying to communicate with? Because the platforms that are available each have different benefits to them, but they also have different people using them. So I think an example that a lot of people can relate to is, for example, the difference between email and Instagram, right? So Instagram is typically used by younger people. It's quite a visual platform, and you convey information very differently to what you would do in an email. So there's also, depending on what kind of organization and change you're setting up, and particularly where you're setting it up, there'll be different ones. So maybe if you're in an area that doesn't have a lot of access to the internet and technology, maybe your best thing to do is to talk to people, or to send out posters and letters and have physical media. So really you've got to ask yourself, who is it that I'm trying to communicate with? And it's often that your organization won't just be communicating with one group of people. It will be the communities and it will be the funders. And you'll probably have to do different approaches for both. So what's key, again, is having your message clear, no matter what platform you're on. Make sure you can always come back to the mission, the vision, and the values that you're trying to embody. The few that I've got up here, I'll just run through them one by one. But I think that there's some pretty key ones. So there's social media. Social media, great for getting people along to your events, getting people to, come and listen to your webinar, whatever it is. Social media is great for getting people aware of what your organization is. But often people don't spend a huge amount of time going through each thing. So you've got to be really clear and concise with your message. So if it's Instagram, someone will see it, and to get somebody to click on a link, you've got to be really impactful. So just think about that, and also be aware that on these platforms, you'll typically have younger people and a different type of engagement because of that. So it's probably quite hard to get donations through these platforms, for example, without the personal face. The second one that I've got here, and it's another service that I recommend having a look at. They've got a free version. It's called MailChimp. MailChimp is an email newsletter provider, essentially. So if you get email addresses from the people who support your organization, maybe they come to your event, or maybe they just sign up and say, we want to know more, or maybe they say, we want to donate. MailChimp is a way of keeping all of the email addresses that you have, all of the contacts, and also sending out newsletters. So again, just like the website example that we went through, they've got some great templates and they have some free options so that you can very easily, without having to use an email address, without having to use like a Gmail account, send an email to a lot of people very quickly. And just in case you're wondering, why can I not just use my Gmail account that I've set up? Gmail has inbuilt features to stop spam, for example. It has to stop spam. And so they're very cautious with letting people send emails to a lot of people at the same time. It's also, and so they'll often block your email. It's also possible, you have to be very careful not to send out the email addresses by writing to everybody in the to field of your email, because that's information that's been provided to you for a certain purpose, and it's not, you shouldn't share that. And so it's very easy with email to get mixed up between to and CC and BCC. having a specific newsletter platform, such as MailChimp, will take the hassle out of this. The final one that I have here, just a little graphic that I knocked up, but it's meant to represent posters and leaflets. And that's saying, yeah, while you can reach a lot of people very quickly through online and digital platforms, there is also a great value in actually having something in front of someone in hard copy, being there face to face, turning up to events with some information about your organization and answering questions and talking to people about it. So never underestimate what can come of working through things in person. So make sure you do turn up. Don't just rely on one of these platforms, and particularly don't just rely on social media. This 2 points here are very passionate, strong passions of mine. There's project sustainability and personal sustainability. Project sustainability is about how you keep driving towards your mission. No matter how you start your project, you're always going to encounter problems. Even if you go through all of the guides that I've given you today, there's always going to be challenges. And these could be something completely unrelated. Maybe something happens in your personal life that makes it really hard to commit the time. Things like that. How do you overcome these? So here are 6 points that I think are key. Firstly, always remember your mission and vision. Remember why you are driving to achieve the change you are. And again, take the ego out of it. Make sure that everything you do is to that aim. And it's not about, what you personally will receive in recognition and things like that. So in doing that, make sure that everyone who is working on the project has the same goals in mind. Make sure everyone is involved in the decision making. There are a few things that I think are key as well, and it's about accountability. So even though often people will come on board projects as volunteers and they'll be doing things because they're passionate and out of the goodness of their heart, it's still key that you achieve what you're trying to achieve. If you spend your time, chasing up people and trying to, and not meeting deadlines and things like that, then, you will struggle to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve. So I think it's worth having a discussion with everybody about what it is you're trying to achieve. So here I've got key performance indicators, KPIs. What is it that you're trying to achieve? How can you track those? And how can you make sure that you and the people that you're working with stay accountable and make sure you achieve them? So it's really about being disciplined. Point 3 is embrace your failures. So Engineers Without Borders, an organization that I talked about before, every year they release a failure report. And this is where they talk about everything that they tried to do that went wrong. And I think just as much as we can learn from what others have done that's gone well, we can learn from what we've done and what others have done that didn't go so well. Because there's no point you trying something and then someone trying the exact same thing the next year with no results. I think it was Einstein who said, or who basically said that it's silly to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. So it's worth acknowledging. It's worth acknowledging what's went wrong and owning up to that, so that you can make sure that you do things differently in future. So make sure that when you work through, once you finish an event, once you finish a program or a campaign, take some time to reflect on it. Number 4, funding. We've already addressed this, but this is a big weakness for a lot of organizations. Make sure you really nail this, because while you can have great ideas, it's very demoralizing if you can't support them. So that's all I'll say on that one. Number 5, ask for help. I've said this going through this presentation multiple times, but it's really important. Don't ever feel that you are stuck and can't do something. there's always people within your team and people externally that you can reach out for. So it doesn't matter if it's a silly question. Essentially, people will want to help you. So ask. And the sixth one is personal sustainability. So this is for you and people on your team. Make sure that what you're doing is not damaging yourself or your ability to contribute in future. So we'll move further on to that personal sustainability point. So personal sustainability. Here are just a couple of methods that I've used that I've found effective in making sure that I don't burn out with an when I'm committing my time to an organization. Because often you and volunteers or people that you're working with will have a lot of things going on. They have personal things, they have work, they have extracurriculars, and they have to juggle those. And I think we've all encountered that difficulty. So I think one key way of juggling that is by making things very separate. So every time that I volunteer for an organization, even if I do it daily, I sign into a timesheet. So I go in and I write the time that I'm starting my volunteering. Then when I finish, I write the time again. And that's my way of saying, acknowledging now I'm starting on something. But once I've said, I've signed it and this is the time that I finished working on it, I put that down and I come back to that later. That's, I then work on something else. And I think this comes through in a few different ways. So it's there in the timesheet point. But points 1 and 2 are separating your personal life, but also separating your emails. Make sure that you don't have everything coming through and bombarding you with information. So yes, still when you get emails, it's courteous to reply as soon as you can, saying thank you for sending me an email. But I recommend don't always reply right then and there if you don't have to. What a method that I've used is saying, hi, thank you for your email. I will be working on this later tonight, and I will send you a response then. Otherwise, every time that something comes up with your organization, if you drop your entire life to deal with that, then your personal life will suffer. So schedule time, keep it discreet, and I think that is important. Number 5, discuss personal development. I think it's important to recognize that when people volunteer for a cause, it often is because they're passionate. But the thing that's not discussed enough is that a lot of people volunteer because they want to learn. They want to develop themselves and they want to grow or learn a skill. So discuss it with yourself, with your team. Why is it, what is it that you personally want to get out of this? And that's okay to have goals yourself, as well as having the overall organizational goals. Maybe you want to learn how to work better with an organization. Maybe you want to, learn how to deal with finances and things like that. And that's okay. That's great, actually. Just make sure that you acknowledge that. And so people can feel as though they're personally getting something out of it. And that makes it even more rewarding. And number 6, I've said this before, but it's totally key. Ask for help. So there's one more point that I'd like to address before we hit questions, and that is breaking the rules. So the reason that I say breaking the rules is because I've just spent the best part of an hour telling you how you can do things. And all of these are suggestions. Every time you do something, the circumstances will be different, and there'll be different ways at achieving things. A little line that I came up with, which I thought was quite cool, was change is doing things differently. It's quite self-explanatory, but if you want things to be different to how they are now, which is what driving change is about, doing things the same way they've always been done isn't always going to achieve the best outcome. So I want to run you through one example that's really resonated with me, and I think it's a great place to finish with this. There is an organization set up in Australia called Thank You. And Thank You started selling bottled water to make change. Their idea was that bottled water is something that comes for free, but people still buy it. So, how can we use this to do good? They wanted to get the two major supermarkets in Australia, Coles and Woolworths, to stock their products. And they were having meetings with the management, and, there's a very slow process of going through the traditional processes and, getting a product to market. But they thought, we really want to make an impact. The proceeds of our organization are going to a good cause. How can we really do something differently? So what they did, and what they have here in this image, is they took a helicopter and they made a massive sign, and they flew the helicopter around the headquarters of both of the major supermarkets, Coles and Woolworths in Australia. So the sign says, "Hey Coles," or "Hey Woolworths, thank you for changing the world if you say yes," or "Together we can change the world." And so that really made an impact. That's crazy, it's ridiculous, but it achieved what they were trying to achieve. What happened, the supermarkets did stock their product. They've really stood out, and they've grown incredibly as a brand. So just try things, set up a website and just get stuck in. If it doesn't work, have another crack. So really, thank you for listening to my framework. That is the message that I hope that it's been really helpful. If you have any questions, I'm going to take some time now to answer those. Again, thank you so much for listening. And so if you've got questions now, send them through, but I'll make sure you're able to contact me after this as well, because if you get stuck while going through any of these things, maybe you're trying to find an organization to work with, or trying to set up a website, as I said, it's important to ask. So I'll make sure I'm available should you have any questions. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and spend some time answering questions if you have any. So feel free to check them in the chat. If you don't, as I say, I'll make myself available in future. So I guess what I'll just, to recap is, in case any questions have come up, I'll just go through what the 10 steps were, just to jog your memory and kind of conclude. So the first one was defining your purpose. The next one, starting your own project, or considering working with an existing one, or using resources that are out there. The next one, building a team, followed by setting up email and drives and setting up a website. Funding, very important to an organization. Number 7 was advertising or outreach, using the different platforms to talk to people. And choosing who you want to talk to, asking who is it that is my target audience, and choosing those. Cool, we've got questions coming through. I'll just finish this and address those. So the next is project sustainability and personal sustainability. These are key. Really invest time in your organization and yourself so that you can continue to have the impact that you want in future. And finally, breaking the rules. Great. So we've got a question in the chat. How would you address conflicts within your organization and/or different vision that members might have for your organization? I think that's a really good question. So when I went through the steps at the start, one thing that is important to note is that often there are different visions and there are different ways that things are set up. And like I said, the mission and vision and values, it's important that everyone's on the same page with those. So the reason that I've personally seen a lot of people start organizations because they don't think that they can work with ones that are already out there, and they're too misaligned. And I think that it's important to know that you have that option. But I've also seen it work really well when people have got on board organizations that are struggling and helped them. So, they might not have been achieving things, and they might not have kind of found the right ways to implement their vision and their values. So those conflicts can be there and they can be resolved. So I think the best way, in my opinion, and again, there's plenty of ways to do this, but the best way is transparency and communication. So it's worth addressing and acknowledging the fact that people might have different opinions of what you're trying to achieve and how you're trying to get there. And I think having those people involved in the decision making is really important. And there are two ways that this could be resolved. And I don't think that either is the right way. They can both be okay. So the first way it could be resolved is that someone has a different idea of how something could work, and it's a new idea, and you take it on board, and you could achieve something. Because it's worth noting that people have different experiences, and you should be accepting of ideas and sort of try them out. And it could work really well. So firstly, acknowledge the skills that person and experience that person brings, and do embrace it. Give it a try. If it works, great. If it doesn't, at least you've tried, and I think they'll respect that. The other way that it could end is that if the vision really is different from what you and your organization have set out to achieve, it might be that that person isn't best applying their skills and meeting their passions within your organization. And so I think that it's okay to have a discussion with somebody and also yourself, working through that sort of framework of what is it that I'm really passionate about, and is this the best organization for me to commit my time to and commit my skills to? And if the answer to that is no, then there are plenty of avenues. There are new organizations, and there's always the option of starting your own organization and just going through that process again. And it's okay. It's okay to take the skills that you've learned from one organization and take them to another, to start a new organization, and to do things differently. But I think what's really important in that situation is just to make sure that you are respectful, make sure that you discuss things with people and allow those conversations to occur, so that no matter what you decide on, whether or not you will continue to work together or go separate ways, it's a mutual decision. And you can continue to share resources, share experiences, even if the way in which you're going about achieving change is different. Cool, thank you for that question. It's great to see so many people sort of sharing where they are and where they're listening to this from. I really appreciate that. We've got another question in the chat that I'll just read now. So this is one from Colleen. She said, what do you think about the fact that sometimes organizations could take a year to fly because of delays in implementation or start of the project? Again, a great question. Thank you so much for sharing all of your questions. I appreciate it. So I think that while I might sort of sound repetitive at this stage, it always comes back to what you're trying to achieve, your mission, your vision, because your vision is what you're trying to achieve and your mission is how you're going to get there. So there's a follow-up to this question, so I'll just read that and before I answer. Does the understanding that the organization might just be undergoing labor pains still acceptable if it's taking a year to start, maybe because of lack of human resources? So I'll address both of those as I go through. I think what's important is that that you go through the process and bear in mind what you're trying to achieve the whole time. I think it comes back to values. If you can truly say that you have committed the time and gone about achieving what you're trying to achieve wholeheartedly, then it's okay. It's okay to take time to do things, and it's okay to do things and for them not to work out and to try a new way, and that can take time, and that's okay. sometimes that's what it is, and it's just that you're coming up against different circumstances, but as long as you're trying, great. Sometimes, and I think this sort of addresses your second point, it's, you can see times, and I've personally seen times in organizations where they have the AGM, the annual meeting, and it's the same question, that the same problems that they're addressing year in, year out. How can that be if they've got so many people working on this goal? And I think what that comes down to is, as you say, it's probably about human resources, but it's about accountability. So if you have people working on a cause and you're trying to create change, there should be some development. And if that's not, I think there are two areas that you can address to try and achieve that change and try and rectify that. And so I think it's very easy to firstly, like you say, look at the human resources and the amount of time that the people in your organization are committing. And it is worth looking at this and making sure that everyone is on the same page, everyone's there for the right reason, and they're trying to achieve that vision. But it's also possible that there's another place that you should look, and that is at the organization itself. Look at how you've structured it and the processes that you've set up. Because it could be the case that while people are committing time, there's not the internal processes to support that. So maybe, for example, the reason that people are doing the same thing that they were doing a year ago is because that knowledge isn't being captured. So, for example, I've seen organizations, they hire people every year. And so in order to hire new people, they write a role description, they advertise. Because they're hiring people for the same role, they could just take the role description from the year before. But if it's not captured, if the process isn't there, then they end up having to spend more time writing that role description again. And so I think that can lose a lot of time. So there are questions that you can ask yourself as sort of the organization side of your organization, the executive side, as to whether or not you are facilitating and sort of cultivating that change in a way that the people who are volunteering, A, can be held accountable for what they say that they are aiming to do, and B, that they have the resources and they have the support that's required. And if they don't, again, that's okay. Where I think it's important to acknowledge the areas that were not so strong, and it could just be, we'll try getting some help from an organization that isn't going through this right now, that has overcome this, and see what they did. So it's worth having those discussions and sort of opening up and really letting people know what it is specifically that you're having trouble with. And maybe if it is, motivating people, then get someone on board. There are some really motivational people in existing organizations that I think will do great things in your organization. So I hope that's answered your question. But yeah, so labor pains, as you put it, yeah, it could be. It could be that it could be that it's just encountering difficulty, but you've been pushing hard, and that's great. Just keep pushing. But otherwise, take some time to address the issue, think about what it could be, but also take some time and some humility to ask whether or not the fault is within the organization itself, and maybe the leadership style that you've previously been using. And remember that everyone should be developing within the organization, including leadership too. Cool. All right. Looks like that's great. If there are any more questions, keep them coming through. I'll stay on the line for a few more minutes either way. But as I say, if it comes to, tomorrow or, 6 months or a year's time, and you think, and this is the right time for you to start an organization or to lead change, and you think, there's something I really wish that I could have asked. Like I say, I'll make something available for, probably in the comments of this video, for you to be able to contact me and ask. So don't be restricted to right now. If you're watching this video not live, for example, do contact me, and or ask your question later in the comments of the video, and I'll make an effort to come back and check, so that we can continue this conversation. And I think that's what it should be. It shouldn't ever be that there is one right way of doing things. I'm learning. Everyone's learning. So I do appreciate this opportunity as well, because I think that it's great for myself to develop this experience of sharing the lessons and experiences that I've had today. So I'm going to start wrapping up. If you've got questions, as I say, don't hesitate to send them through. But I'd like to say a great thank you to everyone who has tuned in today, either live or in future. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know that there are some difficult time zones to be watching this from, so thank you. I really appreciate the support, and also you giving me this platform to share my experience. I would say thank you to Global Changemakers, not only for selecting me to come to the Global Youth Summit last year, where I, learned so much from so many people. That was a great platform to have these experiences. And I do recommend, if you're watching this and haven't attended a Global Youth Summit or haven't applied in the past, definitely do check that out. That's one of the great places that you can meet people and have these discussions. This is people who have gone through the similar challenges that you might face. And it's a fantastic resource for starting an organization and leading change. So a huge shout out and thank you to Global Changemakers. I think I'm going to wrap up there. So once more, reach out if I can be of any help at all. And otherwise, thank you so much. Have a good morning, night, day, wherever you are. And all the best creating the change that you want to see. Thank you.